Good morning. This is a public session of the Chatham Conservation Commission being held on August 11th, 2021, in accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, Wetlands Protection Act, and the Town of Chatham Wetlands Protection Bylaw, Chapter 272. My name is Bob Rawls, and I serve as the chair. Hearings are broadcast live on Channel 18. And hearings. This is a work session. Sorry. This is. Oh my God. Today's session will be conducted via remote video conference, originally pursuant to the governor's emergency COVID order, and now under an order allowing remote public hearings through April 1st, 2022. The agenda and copies of documents for review today are posted on the town's website. To all participants, please remain muted unless you are speaking. If you're attending via phone, mute using *6 and use *6 again to unmute. As we consider each matter, I'll normally ask for comments and questions from commissioners, then participants. If you're on the Teams platform, indicate that you wish to speak by using the raise hand feature. And if you're attending by phone, please unmute with *6 and address the chair. If you are a participant on the Teams platform, please keep your camera turned off unless you are speaking, or if you're a member of the commission. The commission will vote on each matter before it by roll call. So that we have a record of a quorum, I'll now ask each commissioner or associate to indicate their presence. Bob Del Vecchio.
Present.
Janet Williams.
Present.
Tom Clark.
Present.
Joe Kitts.
Present.
Karen Latin.
Present.
Terry Sullivan, I believe, is not here today. Mary Sullivan.
Present.
Trina Francisconi.
Present.
And William Doherty. Not sure that we have William. Okay. We have had I believe, a request for one continuance, I think for 356 and 366 Shore Road, otherwise known as Chatham Bars Inn. So if you're here for that, it will not be heard today. And with that, I believe we're ready with the agenda, Nikki.
Okay, we have a request for determination of applicability for 1151 Old Queen Anne Road, Cleanfield Capital LLC, map 6H, parcel 1A, replace an existing deck, construction of a new patio, removal of construction material, placement of shed, and restoration of a driveway. And I will share the revised plan that was submitted. And I believe David Clark should be present to give any comments.
Yes, I am. David Clark, for the record, Clark Engineering on behalf of Cleanfield Capital. So in talking with the applicant, we came to the conclusion that mitigation plantings are appropriate in this area for the net increase in site coverage. And so we did take a look at the project as a whole. Obviously, you see that the shed's been moved outside your jurisdiction to comply with zoning. We've added mitigation plantings to the southeast of the house. We've also reduced the driveway in that we'll have to do some excavation into the bank behind the house in order to get the shed in there. So that would be the opportunity to push the driveway to the west and get the circulation area that he's looking for. So we've reduced the amount of driveway within your jurisdiction and removed the shed and have added the mitigation plantings that the commission requested.
Okay.
That would be basically that's the changes that are before you.
Right. And I believe that the gist of our last hearing was that we were asking for mitigation, which you have provided. And so I will just open this one up for comments, commission. And we have
I
Janet.
have a couple of questions.
Okay, well, I saw Janet's hand first before I heard you,
Oh,
Tom. so-
sure, of course.
That's okay. I could wait. Actually let Tom go because mine's more of a comment and I'd like to hear what the
Okay.
questions are before I weigh in.
Oops, I have something from William.
Hi there.
Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I'm sorry. David, I just wanted to confirm a few things, just to make sure that I understand the site correctly. There's no construction within 50 feet of the BVW, correct?
Correct.
And the deck's is the deck following the footprint of the former deck, the new deck?
No, it's the old deck wrapped around the house. The applicant wants to just have a deck on the east side of the house and a patio on the south side of the house. So it's not all within the footprint of what was there before, no.
Okay, thank you. Now, and the deck's going to use sonotubes, is that correct?
Either sonotubes or the diamond piers, whichever's easier.
Okay. The reason I ask is we have listed sonotubes as a mitigation factor, at least in the guidance part of our regulatory scheme, you might say. So what is it? Can you give us the advantage of either one of those? Just so it's in the record?
The diamond piers are less intrusive. Basically, you just need to do a leveling pad for the pier and set them in place and then drive the diagonal steel tubing through them. So it avoids excavating for frost protection, which would be required for a sonotube. The problem with the diamond piers is there's only very few contractors on the Cape that do it. So you would be at the mercy of their schedule. Whereas sonotubes, obviously, you just go down the Home Depot and get a sonotube and you could dig the hole yourself. It all depends on the timing. The contractor probably would prefer to dig the sonotubes. And given this particular location, it's easy access for a small skid steer machine with an auger to simply auger the holes. It could do all the holes in a matter of less than an hour. And so at this point, it's probably quicker to do the sonotubes, and that's most likely the direction we'll be going.
Is the advantage of the sonotubes that they result in less impact on the land?
The footprint of the sonotube after installation is less than a diamond pier, but the advantage of the diamond pier is that there's really no excavation involved. So a 1 foot diameter, 12-inch diameter sonotube is going to require 6 inches on each side to do the digging if you did it by hand. So at the end of the day, it's about a wash. There's really no impacts with either on the environment, in that they're under the deck, and the deck itself is what's occupying the resource area.
Okay, I just wanted to get that in the record, and I'll thank you for helping. And is the patio going to be dry laid? I seem to
Yes.
remember you said that before.
I need to condition that my response, and that yes, it will be dry laid, but the applicant is expecting to have a wet set border to confine the interior. So there's two ways to do that: either wet set a masonry product or put a steel curbing around it. So he is asking for a wet set perimeter, which would be 8 to 12 inches And that's just to keep the interior dry laid material in place.
Okay. And then I noticed admittedly, I'm looking at 8.5 by 11 version of the plan, so some details are not readily apparent to my poor sight. Is the let's see, if I noticed that there's a few steps that are there. You have steppers going around, and I noticed a few of them. Again, looking at the 8.5 by 11 version of the plan, appear to be within the 100-foot. Is there any? Are you going to dry lay those, or is
Yes.
that just? Are they just going to be set like the rest, or are they all going to be dry laid?
They'll all be dry laid. There's no real reason to wet set those, especially the ones in your jurisdiction. Yeah. So there's of the steppers, I think 1.5 of them are within the 100-foot.
Yeah, something like that. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. I don't have any more questions.
All right, Janet.
Okay. Tom, thanks for asking that question about the sonotubes versus the diamond piers, because we've approved both in different circumstances for deck construction, and I've often wondered whether one is actually preferable to the other in terms of their environmental impact. And so I'm glad to hear that my assumption that, as David put it, it's a bit of a wash. They're equal in their impact, although in different ways. So that's helpful information to have. So I just wanted to say I'm heartened that the applicant heard our concerns last time and came back and moved the shed, added the mitigation plantings, reduced the driveway. All good. And with that, given the extent of current disturbance on this site in the 100-foot area and what they're proposing, it seems to me to be no increased impact. So good to see that. That's my comment.
I think,
Thank you,
Janet, you raised a good point. I think we ought to consider perhaps if we're going to give mitigation credit for sonotubes, maybe we should think about giving mitigation credit for using diamond piers.
Well, yeah, I guess both of those are an alternative to setting, large timber pilings into the ground to support a deck. And one last comment. In terms, David, of the choice between the steel curbing or a wet set border on that patio, I would certainly prefer to see the steel curbing, if only because that is not a permanent installation, and if any issue arises with the water management in and around that patio, that can be easily adjusted or changed, whereas a wet set border, not so much.
Okay, thank you, Janet. Karen has her hand up.
Yeah, I just have one quick question. I noticed that the proposed parking space is within the 50 to 100, and yet in the land subject to flooding, the 50 to 100, I don't see any increase in footage for that. It looks like the existing driveway 179 and the new is 179. So I'm just wondering about that. Is that because it's gravel and so it's not considered necessary to highlight?
What we removed from the plan was the expansion of what's there now. If you've been to the site, you'll see that there is a lot of stockpile materials to the left of the driveway as you come in. And that was all driveway before. So when those materials are removed, the driveway will still be there underneath, and we're just going to resurface it. So there's really no expansion of the driveway.
Then you may want to change the wording on the plan because it says proposed parking space and it's actually existing. It sounds like it's being added. That's just my comment.
Oh, I see. Yep, I forgot to take that proposed parking
Yeah,
space off.
that's why I was
Yeah.
questioning it.
Yep. No, I
Okay.
understand.
Thank you.
Yep, that would be confusing, absolutely. So I can take that word proposed off.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Bob?
I had a question on the mitigation area, David. Why was that area chosen?
It's below the top of the slope there, so I mean, it can go anywhere on the property. There's really not a lot of, or any invasives south of the house all the way to the pond. So we decided just to pick a spot and randomly put eight plantings to get us to the required mitigation area.
And there's, yeah, like you say, there are no invasives there. That was my,
I didn't
that's why I
see
asked the
any.
question. Yeah,
And we're separated from the wetland by the neighbor's driveway.
yeah,
So it's really all upland species from the driveway up to the applicant's house. So and it's all upland vegetation. It's all the underlying soils are really sandy. So there's really no place on the property except down adjacent to the pond to put in true wetland habitat type vegetation. It is really dry once you get up the hill from the driveway.
yeah. And they'll be cared, the plants will be cared for.
It's closer to the house, so watering them with a spigot is a lot easier than if it was anywhere south of the house. That's a good point. That they'll more likely be cared for in the area that we're proposing.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I don't see any other hands up. I guess I think we've gotten what we asked for, and I agree with Janet that the impact of the project is relatively nil on the environment. I would propose that there be demarcation around this mitigation area, as is my custom to ask for that, because going forward, even after the property changes hands, it becomes a little more clear that that's a special area. It shouldn't be weed whacked. It shouldn't be mowed. It shouldn't be removed, etc. So would the applicant be agreeable to that? We're talking about the normal customary stones, markers, even low split rail fence, whatever.
I don't think it needs a fence, but maybe some posts around it. It's certainly not an area of the yard where anybody would really want to spend time or try to manage as a landscape area, a formal landscape area, because it is a slope down to the neighbor's driveway. So it's quite although it's close to the house, it's really removed from any areas that would be used for outdoor activities. But yeah, I can see us putting 4 posts around it once the mitigation plantings are in. That shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, thank you. We'll put that in the OC. I'm gathering from the comments that so far that there are no objections to moving this forward to a work session. So
It's an RDA, so it's not a work session.
I'm sorry. It is an RDA. So we can take this to a vote.
We would want a -3.
Bob, could we get confirmation on Janet's request about putting steel curbing around the patio?
Sure.
I don't think we're going to see a lot of runoff from this. I mean, we could always just tilt the curbing inwards just slightly, so any stormwater generated from that 1 foot wide strip is directed inward. Again, I mean, this area, Chatham, and particularly this property, the underlying soils are coarse sand. So I don't even a 25-year storm event, although on paper there might be some runoff, there's not going to be any runoff from this.
Was that a
In
yes or a
reply-
no?
It sounds like a no.
Well, I'm sorry, David, but you did say that your client was considering one or the other. So,
No, well, he prefers to do the wet laid perimeter. Just, that's what he's requesting.
okay.
No further commentary. Anybody else have any commentary on that particular issue?
No, other than to
Okay.
note that he was set on that, it would have been
Yeah.
better to just propose that before I got more interested in the other option, but it's still not enough of an impact to make me say it's not going to get in.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's the way I would see it as well. So, can we entertain a vote, Bob?
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we approve a -3 determination for 1151 Old Queen Anne Road.
Clark, second.
All right, Bob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Janet,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Karen,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. So that's unanimously approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next one is a request for determination of applicability for 105 Orleans Road for Madeline Gifford, map 15H, parcel 2-L2. And this is a septic upgrade. I'm not sure if
Who's here?
Dan or
Yeah, Dan Ojala from Down Cape. Hi, for the record, my name is Daniel Ojala. I'm a land surveyor and civil engineer with Down Cape Engineering in Yarmouthport, and helping the folks here, the Giffords, out at 105 Orleans Road with a pretty routine septic upgrade. This is a situation where they've got a very deep, older failed system. There's a lens of clay down almost 10 feet, and it looks like they depressed the old system beneath that. The modern style likes the systems to breathe a little more, so we're raising the plumbing up and stripping out that layer of clay and just bringing in sand and setting the leaching higher so that it breathes a little bit better, only 3 feet below the surface. That'll give us a nice depth of groundwater, good filtration, and these septic upgrades under what they call maximum feasible compliance under Title V. You do the best you can with what you have. Here, we're almost able to meet the 100 feet off the wetland. You see we've got it squeezed up into the corner of the lot. It's about 95 feet away, round figures. There's a little bit of piping that gets maybe 65, 70 away, a little bit of silt fence, but the area out front is nice and level. It's a walkout and it tapers down towards the BVW in the back, which is, a perched swampy wetland, kind of a nice area back there. We're nowhere near it, so I think this is a pretty straight one for you guys to approve. Again, we're doing the best we can with what we have. We're in front of the health department soon for, what I'd characterize as fairly modest variances. And I'd be glad to answer any questions you have on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it does appear to me at least, that you have very few options and that it's largely unavoidable for the small encroachment into the resource area, and it's one of those it is what it is projects, I think. But anyway, I'll open it up for questions, and Bob has one.
I just wanted to ask if there would be any plant removal in the process.
So there's a little tiny Japanese red maple out front. It's a lawn area, first of all, so very, very little. But there may be one little tree to be transplanted. But other than that, I think it's a pretty clean shot out front. They'll button it back up and put it back pretty much the way that it was. Maybe relocating maybe a 1.5 inch caliper tree.
And that will be saved?
I would assume it's a beauty, so, and it's easy to transplant. I haven't conditioned that, but I would assume that the owner will say, the buyer and owner and seller would say, that's a no-brainer. Let's save that little tree. If I can make a special note to them if you'd like.
Yeah, and how would that be cared for after it's transplanted?
Well, it would be, up to the landowner and so forth. Again, I think it's actually out of your jurisdiction because it's right near the road, but they would be, typically you do a deep root watering every few days on those until they're well settled, and then they're all right, except during drought. That would be how they'd water it, just with, deep watering with a hose every couple of days.
Okay, just as long as they're aware of the care involved. Thank you.
Right.
Any other comments from anyone?
I have a question, Bob.
Okay, Tom.
Where's the leach field?
So the existing leach field is just about where the proposed one is now. And the proposed one is the two large dark squares that's crammed up 10 feet off the street and 10 feet off the lot line in that northeast corner. So that's it there, the large box style structure. Does that answer your question?
Actually, I thought that was part of the septic tank, which tells you what I know.
Okay, no,
Okay,
yeah.
is it like a vertical leach field? I'm used to seeing them, spread out and so on. In other words, is it just in essence like a dry well for all practical purposes?
Well, so the way Title V is written, you used to be able to do a much more compact footprint because they give you credit for, up to 6 feet of sidewall. Now they only do, like you say, 2 feet of sidewall. So you need these longer stretched out systems. So what this one is about 30 feet long and about 10 feet wide and a 2 foot effective depth. So that's the most efficient, when you have some depth of groundwater, it's the most efficient package that they allow in Title V. We're taking credit for 2 feet of sidewall and the full bottom area at the fastest rate, which is 0.74 gallons per day per square foot. So that shape, the long, wide 30 by 10 is pretty typical for a 3-bedroom house these days. You can still put pits in, but you don't get the credit for them, so nobody does. And you probably need 2 or 3 pits, so that wouldn't make sense. So this style, the 30 by 10 is, it's pretty typical. A lot of times you'll see the plastic chambers. We like to use the precast concrete. It just gives you a little more storage volume, in my opinion, but it's a personal preference from a designer's point of view.
Okay. How deep is the groundwater?
So the groundwater we never hit. It would be perched probably down about the elevation of the lake in the back, or maybe a little deeper. But we're 60 feet above sea level and pretty close to the ocean. So that's not a true groundwater. That would be it's perched system on a lens of clay, which is pretty typical, for the area. But they will have, we figured, a minimum of 7 or 8 feet of dry sand underneath. I would guess there's probably 20-something feet underneath, at least, in this area.
Well, let me try that again. Below the bottom of your, I'm going to call it a pit, but I'm sure that's not the correct term. Your squares that are going to, into which the waste is going to be directed, I assume, as it comes out of the tank. The bottom of that area, how far is that above groundwater?
It's 7.7 feet above the bottom of the hole, but we never hit water, so it's a tricky question to answer. Again, I think it's you've got basically an ashtray full of clay that's got the water in it to our south, and then probably beneath that, you never really know, but there could be multiple lenses of clay. The aquifer can be very, very complex, but generally it only goes up about 2% off the ocean, which is just to our east, the true groundwater. But again, anytime you put like a sheet of plastic on the ground and curl the edges up, you're going to form basically an underground swimming pool, and it'll hold, if the ground intercepts that, it'll hold a little perched wetland, we call it. So it's a very tough question to answer, but the bottom line is very safe system. You've got at least 7 feet, almost 8 of dry sand underneath that to filter any pathogens out. So it meets all the current codes. And very likely, if there's not another lens of clay, it goes down, 20 some odd, 30 feet before you'll hit the true groundwater table.
Okay, I'm used to perched and complex sites, so, that's not, you're not speaking to a stranger on that one.
Yeah.
Is the tank, or is the system gonna be one of the low nitrogen sites? The reason I ask that is we give, consideration in terms of mitigation for septic systems that are, designed to be low nitrogen emitting, septic systems.
Correct. Yeah, because this is a transfer and we're just doing the minimum code required. We're not proposing that in this case. It is right on Orleans Road. I don't know what the future. We're running the sewer pipe out the front, so if there ever is a collection sewer down the road, we'll be all set to tie in. And that would perhaps, if there is a future connection, be a reason not to do an IA this year. But short answer, no, we're hoping to not do that in this particular case. Just trying to tread lightly and keep as far from your resources as we can here and do a conventional Title V system.
All right, thank you for being so forthcoming on this. I appreciate it.
No other
That's
comments?
it for me, Bob.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I see no other hands raised. I hear no other comments, so I think, Bob, that we're ready for a motion.
And this would be a -3 as well?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we approve a -3 determination for 105 Orleans Road.
Clark, second.
All right, roll call vote. Bob,
Aye.
Janet,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Karen,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well, so that is unanimous.
All right. Really appreciate your time very much, folks. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Next, we have a notice of intent for 356 and 366 Shore Road, Chatham Bars Inn, map 16F, parcels 25-E5 and 24A-E6. And this is the beach access stairway that has requested a continuance to August 25th.
All right,
I'd like to make a motion that we continue 356 and 366 Shore Road to August 25th.
Clark seconds the motion, and I assume the date has been was requested by the applicant.
Yes.
Okay. I always like to have that in the record so that we don't run into time limit questions.
all right. Roll call vote. Bob,
Aye.
Janet,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Karen,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So we'll see you on the 25th.
All right. Now we have a notice of intent for 157 Sears Road, James Bartlett, map 11A1, parcel 4-T2, proposed coastal bank and erosion stability and restoration. And either Thad or Seth are available for this one.
Morning.
For the record, Thad Eldridge, East Southeast. I believe Seth is on the line.
Good morning. Yes, Seth Wilkinson's on the line as well.
Morning,
Get to
Seth.
start with an apology that we failed to stake this in time. Our schedule got slipped up. We did get out there yesterday and staked it. I put some photographs online for it. And it's my understanding that the commission would like a site visit of this. I figured since the schedule seemed to be a little light today, we would spend a few moments reviewing the project before the site visit and go from there.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. I agree that a site visit to this would be useful in part because it's instructive. I think it would be instructive for some of the newer members to see this type of project where we have coastal restoration, or a fiber roll being installed, and a salt marsh being restored, and so forth. And so since I think we can take advantage of the opportunity that the staking wasn't done to go look at it. But yeah, please present what you have for us today. You know, I guess in an abbreviated way, and then we can try to schedule something.
So with some of the shoreline changes going on out by Monomoy, we've seen higher tide levels. There was one storm that came in, I believe it was 2019. Pretty much every south-facing coastal bank with a degraded salt marsh in front of it suffered some damage to the toe. We saw that over on Champlain Road. We're seeing it here. It's not completely unstable, not completely stable, but it's something that the homeowner wants to address before it becomes an issue. That ounce of prevention. So the property owner has worked with us and with Wilkinson to come up with a plan to stabilize the bank and to start to restore a salt marsh in front of the coastal bank. I can hand it to Seth to review more of the details.
So this picture that's shown shows those. I'm sorry, did you say Seth? Were you inviting Seth to speak? I didn't quite hear.
Oh, yes, Seth, did you want to review the details of that?
Yeah,
Or?
please do.
Sure, but if the chair has a question, happy to.
No, go ahead. I didn't quite hear what I was saying. That's good. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, for reference, this image is helpful. The wooden groin that you see in the far distance of that shot, it basically is on the property line. It was installed by the neighbors, I believe, and then the staking in front of that in the foreground represents where we would propose to reestablish a marsh. In the same fashion that was used at 498 Shore Road, which came before you in the last month for a certificate of compliance, and also on Woodland Way about a year and a half ago. We found this to be a very effective way to reestablish salt marsh. I look forward to the site visit because there's actually no better place in Chatham to demonstrate the effect that fringing salt marshes have in attenuating storm energy, protecting beach elevations, and mitigating erosion of coastal banks. You can look, anywhere along the shoreline, and wherever the marsh has been lost, the beach is lower, and there's usually erosion behind on the coastal bank, landward of the lower beach. So we're trying to take a comprehensive approach here and solely propose about 55 linear feet of salt marsh extending to the property line, essentially to where that wooden groin is visible. Thank you for that, Tad. You can see it in the green hatching, the seaward green hatching there. We're just sort of setting it in to give it a landward sort of retreated area. That's what salt marshes need to do when they're facing sea level rise. And so we're filling the gap on the property where the marsh is no longer there. I have been monitoring this property for a number of years and have unfortunately watched that marsh be lost. So it's really just in the last few years that marsh has been lost down by the property line. And then we're bringing it in. So there's a little bit of overlap between the existing marsh and a proposed marsh, but you'll see it sort of mirrors where the marsh has become quite thin. We're essentially giving a location for this marsh to migrate into, because that's, in my opinion, as an ecologist, we need to provide these sort of migratory runways for these marshes to move into stable ground and continue to play their very important roles for wildlife habitat, shellfish, finfish, water quality. As you all know, there are many benefits that salt marshes provide to the wetland resources. And then we're just proposing to address the erosion, which has started to form on the coastal bank. Again, I've been watching that from a start as a very small scarp, sort of hoping it might revegetate naturally. But unfortunately, it's as things have opened up in the inlet to the northeast, the erosion seems to be getting worse here. There appears to be higher tides in this part of town, and with the increased tidal range, you tend to see increased erosion. We're not proposing to run the array along the entire section of the bank. It's really just the 100 feet, and holding it off is our practice, 10 feet from the property line. It would be helpful to go right to the property line in this instance, but in the interest of containing any potential end effect on the property, we always propose to hold these back 10 feet in an abundance of caution. In the vicinity of the fibril array, we're also proposing to manage the invasive species. There's sort of a mixed community of native maritime shrubs and some saplings, and also some invasive vines and shrubs. So we would very selectively, just using the cut and wipe method, treat the invasive species on the bank, protect all the native species, and then supplementally replant to replace the invasive shrubs with native shrubs. With about 40 shrubs is what we've determined would be needed in that 100-foot length. So that's a summary of the project. And as Thad said, I think this will be very helpful to see in the field. But if there's any initial questions or additional information that we can provide in advance of the site visit or the next hearing, I'm all ears. Thank you.
All right, I think Janet has one for you.
Good morning. Hi, Seth. Hi, Thad. Thank you for the offer to have a site visit. I agree. I think it would be useful for a whole array of reasons, especially for some of the newer members of the commission to observe this. I'll just, in order to make Nikki's life a little bit easier, because there's so many of us now, to schedule two things I'll note. One is that next Wednesday, the commission is not scheduled to have a hearing. So if the representatives are available, that might be an easy date to agree on. And the second is that I would request that we make sure that the visit's done at low-ish tide, so that the full the whole area can be seen better. At high, I was there yesterday when, I guess right after you had staked it, and be better if the tide's down quite a bit more than that. Seth, I thought this was the same as the Shore Road project in terms of the high marsh aspect of it. Could you just describe for the commission how that works and what the purpose of the encased cobble and sediment is underneath where you're going to plant the new marsh?
Absolutely, thank you, and just thank you also for the earlier 2 points. I do have a tide. I did happen to have a tide chart open, and on the Wednesday the 18th, low tide is at 2:30 in the afternoon. High tide is at 9. So if and probably anytime after 1 o'clock, it'd be fine. But just if folks want to check their calendars while I describe the project. And yeah, this cross section is perfect for this. There is, while the marsh system is very similar to what was used at 498 Shore and Woodland, this is being, there has been a little bit of an evolution here in beaches where you have enough width, which we actually have here. We do like to push that high marsh as far seaward as we can, which is typically right to the edge of mean high water. This allows for a beach to thrive between marsh and coastal bank, and this would be about 9-ish feet wide. It's going to vary a little bit as you go down the shoreline as the coastal bank meanders, but that is one significant difference, is that there in the Shore Road intervention there was a similar fibril array, but the marsh was pushed right up against the toe of that fibril array. We actually have a little bit more room here. And I think that's also helpful for beach walkers. You want to make sure that folks can continue to sort of traverse without walking on the plants in areas where that's popular, which is certainly the case on shore, and I believe it is here as well. So you still have a nice sandy area to walk at low tide, seaward of essentially between the existing marsh and the exists in the proposed reinforced marsh, and then at high tide you'd have the sandy beach along between the coastal bank and the proposed marsh. And so again, that you tend, as you'll see in the site, just looking at the naturally occurring marshes here, that the beaches tend to be higher and drier when they're positioned behind a marsh, and that's because the marsh itself creates turbulence in any sort of storm energy or even moderate tidal energy. There's always sediment in the water column in an estuary such as this, and when you run water over a salt marsh, that creates turbulence in the water column. And it's the same process actually of how like beach grass in an upland environment causes sand to accrete out of the wind column, creates turbulence in the air. Blades of grass are very, very good at doing that. It's a lot of surface area, and it tends to accrete sand in a more upland environment. It works essentially the same way in a marine environment, where those the rough surfaces of the marshes create turbulence, which cause the sand to settle out both on the marsh, but more commonly landward of the marsh. And that's why you tend to see these healthy beaches on the landward side. And then that helps in moderate storm events because the beach is higher and the waves, the lower intensity waves, don't tend to interact with the coastal bank as frequently. And therefore the vegetation is sort of interrupted and impacted less frequently when there's a healthy sandy beach. As you can see all along, where there's the wider marsh, you can see pretty uniform sandy beach, and then as that marsh becomes thinner and non-existent at the property line, you can see the sandy beach is lower and considerably narrower. So that is not a coincidence, in my opinion. Did you want more detail than that?
Well, yeah, so I have a couple of questions about that. I presume that the location of this marsh installation relates directly to the scarp that has formed there to protect that coastal bank against and the fiber roll array against any wave action that could displace it. That if you could go back to Seth's the plan that shows the location of this particular high marsh, as I understand it, Seth, the marsh that's shown on here is all low marsh, because it's below, it's down in the mean, right, and there's no other high marsh on this beach other than what you're proposing. Does that cause any concern about its longevity or stability if it's not, and if it's encased, if the reinforcement, the cobble and the sediment that's encased, that's designed, I think, to hold the plants in place until they get established, is that high marsh able to migrate, or is it set in place because of that?
Yep, all good questions. I think we'll see the predominant high marsh species in the area is the Spartina patens salt meadow hay. There is some on the property, and we can look at that in the field. It sometimes falls higher than the seasonal high water, so it isn't called out as regulatory salt marsh, but it's still comprised of marsh plantings. And these are pretty heavily recreationally used beaches, so it's not unusual to sort of see with walking and putting up towels and things like that, it's not unusual to see less of the high marsh in these environments. This is an area that's not used by our owners here as frequently, so I don't see any conflict with establishing this. But the existing salt marsh, to be clear, is primarily low and middle species. It's primarily salts, Spartina alterniflora, a little bit of marsh lavender working its way in there, and a few other mid-range species. Again, we can look at in the field. But the higher marsh species that we're proposing here are at exactly this elevation. They're generally even higher, sort of at the base of the fiber roll. So the reason that we put the high marsh species there now, because we know that over time the low marsh species will be able to migrate into this area. So with sea level rise, there's every expectation that you're going to see a species change in that. And so the expectation is that existing salt marsh will continue to become sparser and thinner, and those species need to move landward. And so the expectation is that will move in and actually displace the species that we plant when those tide levels are high enough that the inundation period is too high for those species. That could be 5, 10, 20, 25 years down the road. But that's where that migratory runway comes in. So we're putting in species which are appropriate for today's conditions, but we know that over time that's going to change as the conditions change to foster more of a low marsh community. So there's a couple different sort of competing issues at play. What we've seen at the other projects where this is used, and yes, the cobble is sort of a ballasting of the plant materials and the growing medium. I have a whole presentation that I've given to some national and international conferences. It's about 12 or 15 minutes. I could certainly provide it to you at a future hearing if that's of interest, but it basically talks about the evolution of this design. We used to, in Chatham and other places, we used to do these marshes in whether it was low energy or high energy with purely the coconut fiber, compost, and compatible sediment as a growing medium. But what we would see is in the higher energy areas, such as this, that over time, it was just that the plants couldn't hold it on their own. And we've seen that, you know, when those roots can be sort of growing in amongst some smaller cobbles, they perform much better and they can hold their ground. And this is just mimicked after observations that we've seen. You know, there's lots of cobbly areas which have salt marsh all over southeastern Massachusetts, and we've seen them, you know, do better. There's even an example in Eastham of some sort of eco pioneer. I didn't know her, but she chained a bunch of tires together and bolted them together on the Cape Cod Bay Flats and sustained a marsh there much longer than the marsh lasted in all the surrounding vicinities. I think there's definitely better ways to do this than with tires. And now it's a bit of a mess in that part of Eastham, but sort of a similar, you know, is there a natural way to do this? And there is.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the theory behind the practice here.
I'm sure it was advanced for its day. So,
Yes.
no, I'm very heartened to hear the long range thinking going into this, to see projects that actually take into account some of the likely impacts of the unavoidable sea level rise and to allow for the marsh migration to occur. So that's great. Final question, and I'm not sure whether you or Thad is the right person, but I'm curious as to what extent the scarp and the damage that's happened, that's triggering this project, do you think is attributable to the wooden structures, the groins and the bulkheads on the neighboring property?
Well, as an ecologist more than a coastal processes person, I don't think I can quantify that. I couldn't say that it's had no effect. I mean, they are smooth vertical structures, and so we know that waves reflect more effectively off a smooth vertical structure than anything else. You know, so is it having more or less effect than the loss of fringing salt marsh in this area? That's very hard to say. But, you know, and did it contribute to the loss of salt marsh in this area? That's also hard to say. But it's certainly, they're all possibilities, and I think they're all factors. It's always hard to determine what's the primary causal factor of salt marsh loss here. You know, it could be just, you know, too much foot traffic. I'm not there frequently enough to know that. But I couldn't say that it's having no effect, certainly.
But it's the loss of the salt marsh that seems to be the leading driver of the scarp and the erosion on the coastal bank, because it's not protected. Is that...
Yes, I think if you know, if there was just one thing I could do to help this area, it would be to get the marsh back. And again, I think when we can look at that at a lower tide in person, you'll just, as I said, this is the beach I send people to when I'm trying to explain how marshes benefit beaches and coastal banks. This is literally the stretch I send. Go take a walk. It's the best example I know of.
Gonna do.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, that's it for me for now. Thank you.
Okay,
I
yeah.
agree, and I see that Sonia has her hand raised.
Yeah, Sonia, are you with the applicant or?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much for your thoughtful questions, and thank you, Seth and Thad. I'm obviously not a scientist or an expert, but I have been around 157 for 10 years now, and that very last groin wooden thing that comes out directly perpendicular from the bank um, is different. The one that's right on the property line in kind of a strange way, where the seaward end of it is like theirs and the landward end of it is ours, or something like that. That piece, if you look at it, this is probably not the best photo. There may be another one. In that section, you can see where the water has just shot in at that groin, where it looks like the water, yeah, that's probably a better photo. The water at that location seems to shoot directly into the bank because there's quite a bit of scarp on their side of it, and there's a lot more scarp on our side of it. And that piece serves absolutely no purpose. It just sticks out. It is disconnected from the rest of the structures. It has rusty nails sticking out of it. I think it's a danger to the community, and it seems to be doing a lot of harm to the bank. And I just don't see why that piece should be allowed to be there. And that's all I'm going to say. But I have watched it with very, it's given me a lot of anxiety just watching the last 2 winters, how quickly that has accelerated in that very spot. And then the correlation of the loss of salt marsh just exactly seaward of there, that can't be a coincidence in my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's something I guess we can look at more closely at the on-site. I do have a question, and that is, Seth, I remember some of these projects in the past where we got into a little bit of back and forth on the size of the cobble that was being used to anchor rolls and things that were burlapped up, you know. And you're proposing 8 to 10 inch cobble here, and what I think I say I wonder about the same things that I wondered about back then, which is if those become exposed due to wave action, and as I think you said already, this is a turbulent area. What is the likelihood that those could wind up on the beach, either on this property or an adjacent property?
Sure. So using the other projects as reference, these are actually a little bit smaller. So we've downsized from 10 to 12, which I believe was the spec for the other 2 Chatham projects. Again, with the sort of research and development we've done on these programs in the last few years, and also I would say this is lower energy than north of the Chatham Fish Pier. And so those 2 factors have contributed to us to actually downsizing the cobble. So the thing about cobble, unlike smaller grain sediment, which can move a far distance, cobble doesn't tend, if it's exposed, and we haven't seen it get exposed in any other projects, but it's only been a few years. It tends to more or less stay put in these environments. It can be suspended momentarily. If you suspend a grain of sand, it can stay in the water column for hours in a storm event. I think in this type of conditions you're going to see here, it's going to probably just be a matter of seconds, so up and back down. That's again if it's ever exposed, because there is a layer of solid rooting material above the cobbles. They're completely covered up inside the coconut fiber encapsulation. So the idea is that the roots get established and grow down into all the interstitial spaces, and the whole system just works together, and it becomes peat over time. Obviously, it's the end goal, and then that cobble will be embodied in the peat and will be very hard to expose it. Yeah, I mean, is there a storm out there, like a 1% storm, could potentially damage something like this? But it's going to have a lot of other impacts into the shoreline as well. And in the grand scheme of things, I'm not sure how much of a factor the cobbles would be, but certainly an ongoing condition that spoke to, making sure they stayed put would maybe be a reasonable way to assure that concern. I think the property owners certainly, they want a sandy beach. They don't want a cobble beach. And we have seen that the cobble is very helpful for establishment of the marshes.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's sort of what I was thinking too. We need to have a condition in there if we were to prove this, such that would be identified quickly and fixed quickly. All right. Do we have any other questions, comments at this point?
I have a question.
Okay, Tom.
First, I want to congratulate the applicant. I mean, it's nice to see a soft shoreline stabilization project done with this kind of sophistication. What concerns me are the existence of the groins, since they're specifically designed to capture sand that's transported in the longshore current and deplete the sand supply to beach areas immediately downdrift of the structures. So I would suggest we confirm that they are unlicensed and then inquire about whether there are any exceptions that might apply to them, and if not, to politely request the owner to have them all removed.
I would just say, I think that the applicant shares that concern.
Yeah. Right. So the groins are on a neighboring property. Obviously, it's a separate but related issue. We will have to. I think it's a good idea. They appear to be very old. It looks like they've been there for a very, very long time. It could very well be that they were put in prior to the days where these sorts of things had to be licensed. Who knows? But we'll have to dig into that. But when we're there on the on-site, we can get a better feel for whether or not they are contributing or have contributed, continue to contribute, and will contribute to the problems that we see there, and then we can proceed appropriately. So Janet, you have a hand up.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up to that. And I wonder if, Thad, you had done any research on your on the historical aerial photos to see if you could determine when they might have been installed.
I can certainly pull up the 1938s. I think they do appear there.
1938. Okay.
38. Okay.
38.
That's the earliest aerials that we have.
Okay.
That's old.
That's all right. Yeah, we'll need to make a finding, and somehow we'll just need to. That'll be a reference point in terms of what we do about this. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're a little fuzzy. It doesn't look like anything is there in 38, but like I said, they're a little fuzzy.
Yeah, not much good imagery from 38. I don't suppose that there have been discussions with the neighbors on the issue. I assume there have been.
I'm not aware of any positive discussions.
No positive discussions. Okay. All right. We will take that one step at a time. Any other comments or questions? And if not, since we're all here, I wonder if it'd be possible for us to just pencil in a on-site time. I forget now what time you said the low tide was, Seth, for the next.
2:30 is dead low in Stage Harbor.
Okay. So we could get there.
I would say anytime 1 o'clock later would be fine.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering whether or not, let's just say 1 o'clock, would that work for most people's schedule? It would for me. Anyone have a problem? Does anyone have a problem with it? All right.
No,
Why
it
don't we,
works for me.
All right.
Good.
Yeah, so without any further objection, why don't we just pencil it in and we can confirm it, and 1 o'clock on the 18th. And we'll have a closer look,
Quick question for you.
certainly.
Do the homeowners need to be present? We are supposed to be flying on an airplane that day. You're more than welcome to come here without us.
In a way, it might be, I don't think it'll be a problem. And I think your representatives are eminently capable of representing your interests here. In a sense, it might be better from an open meeting perspective that you weren't there. Really, from my point of view, we're not going to be really discussing this much. We're just going to be looking and asking questions, but we're not going to be debating this or discussing it in any great detail.
Okay. Well, we won't be here, but you know where to go.
We've all been there and we're going to go again. Yep.
Right.
All right. So do we then, let's see, what do we need a motion for? We
Need to figure out when to continue to.
continue to, yes.
So we have
Any-
August 25th or September 8th.
Any preference?
August 25th would be great for us.
Yeah, the August 25th would be good.
August 25th. All right. If there's no issue there for us, then Bob, you can feel free to make the motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we continue 157 Sears Road to August 25th, 2021.
Clark, second.
Roll call vote. Bob,
Aye.
Janet,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Karen,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So we'll see. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And we will see you at the onsite.
All right, next up, we have a continued notice of intent for 535 Stage Harbor Road, Kenneth McNeil Taylor Jr. and Susan D. Taylor, map 14A, parcel 4, proposed boardwalk and catwalk.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Bill Riley on behalf of the Taylor family.
Good morning, Bill.
Mr. Taylor is present with me.
That's an old style phone.
That's his cell phone.
Okay.
Okay, I put it on silent. I apologize.
Excellent. All right.
Right, so the Taylors had initially applied to do elevated a walkway to a catwalk providing access to Stage Harbor. Since the last time we met, they have determined that they do not need the elevated walkway to get to their catwalk. The further review of the ground level there shows that the property owned by the Taylors, where it abuts their neighbor to the south, Strablings, is actually elevated and dry virtually 100% of the time. I mean, there might be an occasional time when some of it gets wet, but basically it's dry all the time. And then, of course, they're proposing an elevated catwalk for access across the marsh. You know, their goal there is to protect the marsh. The Taylors have a mooring in Stage Harbor, and they, would like to have their dinghy at the end of their catwalk so they can minimize the amount of mud they have to walk through and not damage the the marsh, but be able to row out to their boat. They also like to kayak and do stand-up paddleboarding, and so having a way to carry their items across the salt marsh without damaging the salt marsh is very important to them. So our design was done by Dave Clark. And so I'd like to have Dave explain his design. And then we can talk about it. David?
David Clark here, Clark Engineering for the record. So, as Bill stated, the boardwalk along the southerly property line has been removed, and we're proposing a footpath in that location. We do show a roll-up walkway, 3 feet wide, and those are available in various lengths, and that's only proposed as an alternative or a future installation should the foot traffic on the path degrade the vegetation to a point where it turns to muck. We don't anticipate that, but we're including it in this application as a fallback if required, and certainly a trigger point in the order conditions that would require us to ask the agent before installing it, and having a site inspection to determine the locations where it's appropriate to put that down. But at this point, we don't feel it's necessary. And so, and then out at the Stage Harbor end, the elevated walkway has been altered to show some access stairs at the end. This is per the request of the Shellfish Advisory Committee. Even though this is above mean high water, they felt that traditionally the public walks along this area for shellfishing, and they asked if we could add those stairs. So that's the change in the plan there. We've also added the 2 easements, the one that the applicant holds over the neighboring property that allows access from the property line to the north along the side of the driveway back to the applicant's property. And then the second easement is an easement that the neighbor holds on the applicant's property that gives them access out to Stage Harbor tidal flats. Those are the changes to the plan. I'd be happy to answer questions. We also added a storage rack for the watercraft, personal watercraft. I was told by the Stage Harbor Committee that in their view, personal watercraft has a different definition than I imagined. This is strictly for kayaks and paddleboards, not jet skis. So the racks would basically be 2 posts with a stringer across on both ends. In the wintertime, obviously the watercraft would be removed and
You have to
stored
speak up, Dave.
Sorry. In the wintertime, the watercraft would be stored up at the house, and the 2 posts and stretcher would then be used to store the sections of the elevated walkway when that is removed in the wintertime. So those are the basic changes to the plan.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
there's an extensive plant mitigation plan and invasive removal plan that are part of this. I don't know if you want to deal with that now, or you want to deal with the roll-up walkway and the elevated, the catwalk first, and then go to the plant aspect.
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually was out there yesterday, and I still didn't. Maybe it's there, but I didn't see staking for the. Are you talking about the mitigation on the upward by the house?
Well, that's part of it, of course.
Yeah, didn't see any staking for that, so I guess I'm still a little confused about that aspect of the project. But I think, I mean, from my perspective, I think we should just go ahead and finish up talking about the core part of the project, and then we can come back to the upland mitigation, because it does seem to be sort of a separate project in a way.
Well, there are aspects of the plant plan that deal with the location
Well, yeah, I do think,
along our property line too. I don't know.
yes, I would be. I do have a quick question though. If the plan now is to have a rollout mat, maybe, but at least for in the beginning there would just be a footpath. The plan, I believe, the mitigation plan talks about mitigation in the area. Would that all go away?
I need, is Teresa Sprague on the line?
Yes, Teresa's here.
Okay, so perhaps Teresa can explain that.
Okay.
Sure. Yep, Teresa Sprague with Blue Flex Design on behalf of the Taylor family. So the restoration in the area where the footpath is going to be located mainly consists of invasive species management, replanting native vegetation in areas that are not going to be open for the footpath. Unfortunately, there's a significant amount of Phragmites that's located just over the Taylor's property line. So management of that and keeping that out of the area where the footpath is going to be is mainly going to consist of mowing or string trimming. The footpath itself would be seeded with a mix of warm and cool season grasses and clover to get that established. It was my recommendation to submit the application with a proposed rollout boardwalk because it's easily installed, easily removed. And it may, if we find that, depending on how often this pathway is used, it is wet in this area. We do want to avoid compaction and we want to avoid loss of vegetation cover. And as David pointed out, or Bill pointed out, it kind of turning to muck. So we did suggest this proposed rollout boardwalk just as a way to alleviate compaction and keep the path clean, for lack of a better term. But the mitigation would be in the form of removing all of the invasive vegetation between the beginning of the footpath and up to the edge of the road where that property extends out to Stage Harbor Road. The invasive vegetation will be removed from that area and bayberry will be replanted. And then we'll have a mix of native grasses in the footpath area. And then we've got some hibiscus mosquitoes located at the very end of the path where it transitions into the salt marsh and the catwalk. I guess the one way to connect the two projects together or how they came about, they're not directly connected together except for the fact that the Taylors were looking to access that piece of property from within the upper portion or the northern portion of the property and try to avoid walking on Stage Harbor Road as much as possible to get to the access, the handle that gets them down across the salt marsh to the harbor. Just because, as you know, Stage Harbor Road is quite a busy road. Its sight lines here are not great. And we were just looking to do invasive species management, restoration, remove some of the lawn, create a vegetated buffer before we get up landward of the salt marsh, and provide a footpath through the northern portion of the property that connects them to this southern portion.
Right. All right. But as to my question as to why it isn't staked, is there a rationale for that?
Dave Clark?
No, we didn't stake it because we felt it was quite obvious where the mitigation was going. And the lower half of the mitigation area is pretty thick and you wouldn't be able to see any of the staking anyway. But if you'd like to see stakes up,
okay, I just
on the
wanted
upland
to hear it. I didn't know
Yeah.
whether it just hadn't been done yet or whether
No.
there was a reason,
No.
the reason behind it.
yeah, sorry.
And I
But we
can
can
sort
certainly
of,
have it done.
yeah, and I don't know if I disagree with your thinking on that. I want to circle back. At the last hearing, there was some discussion right at the end of it where I was wondering whether or not there could be some agreements among the applicant and the easement owners such that perhaps the catwalk would not be strictly necessary. I'm assuming that that didn't bear fruit.
Well, the ad at the last meeting really didn't involve the catwalk, and it involved the elevator to get to the catwalk. The Hovey family, which owns the driveway, pretty good with that. At least I thought they did. That we use the driveway. Part of the problem is the actual easement is very wet, and so would be not usable as a footpath for a substantial amount of time. So so there was some consideration by the Taylors about using the Hovey driveway to get to the the water end of the existing boathouse, but that area is also frequently wet with high tides and things, and so where the path is suggested is according to Dave Clark's work, is about a foot higher, and typically, particularly that end would be dry almost 100% of the time. And so, the Taylors would prefer to use that path rather than walk down the Hovey's driveway and then across in front of the boathouse.
Okay.
And we think since they're not using an elevated walkway, that sort of that takes the curse away from that our initial proposal, which called for a pretty substantial structure that went a long way, and so removing that we thought was important, and the Taylors are optimistic that once Teresa's plantings are matured, that their use of that walkway will not require even the roll-up walkway. There'll just be a nice vegetated path that's dry almost 100% of the time. It will get them to the catwalk so they can get across the marsh.
All right. I think we should hear from commissioners at this point, and I do think it looks like we have Hoveys who want to talk, and also we have some letters that we need to figure out whether I don't know if they've been posted on the website or not, but we may need to read some of those. So
I haven't gotten any new letters since the elevated walkway was.
Oh, you have not? Okay.
Moved. So they were all from the last one with the old proposal. So I don't know if they're quite relevant anymore. But that's up to you guys.
We do have the letter from the South Harbor. That's new?
Yeah, that one's newer. I can read that one.
Yeah, but let's go ahead. Jan, let's hear from you at this point.
Thanks, Bob. I just have at the moment two clarification questions, and I think as I've been sitting here listening, I may have answered my own question, but I want to get it confirmed. So I was not aware about that the property line as it runs down behind the boathouse, and I'm looking, David, on the plan where that concrete bound is located. At that point, it takes a sharpish turn to the east and runs up through that dike system, so that and then down towards Stage Harbor. So the bottom of the panhandle has, I guess you can call it a scoop or a dipper shape. So it's not so narrow at the bottom. So the Taylors own the so of the second easement, the one referenced on same book, but page 32, is an easement that the neighbors have over the Taylors' property to access Stage Harbor. Do I have that right?
That is correct.
Huh. Okay, because I had thought that was the property line, so that is a change. And then Bill, I think you said that the other easement that the Taylors used to cross the Hovey property, did you say that easement is wet most of the time?
No, no. Well, I don't personally know how frequently it's wet. I know that David Clark and the Taylors reported to me that it's wet frequently.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's,
So frequently,
yeah,
okay.
so, yeah.
Okay, and so thank you for that clarification. And my last clarifying question is for Teresa. I couldn't see into the area where the proposed pathway is because of all the Phragmites that's there. Am I right in thinking that in order to put a footpath there, all that Phragmites has to be removed insofar as it's on the Taylor's property? And you're just going to mow it, and then when you said seed it, can you seed to create a footpath where you've mowed Phragmites?
We are going to mow the Phragmites and treat the Phragmites. So we'll be treating the Phragmites as part of the invasive species management plan. Mowing is going to keep the Phragmites that's directly to the north or northeast of the pathway off of the Taylor property from migrating back into the area. So that's going to be the management method, will be to regularly mow the path to keep the path open. But we will be removing and treating the Phragmites that's located on the Taylor property.
Which is directly abutting the Phragmites on the other side of the property line.
Exactly. So yes, I mean, ideally, I would like to remove that Phragmites from that entire area. So if you're looking at our plan, we've got the Taylor property highlighted in green, and you can see kind of just to the northeast of that, there's existing Phragmites. Between the Taylor property and the existing driveway, gravel drive, it would be great to be able to remove all of that Phragmites, but unfortunately it's off the Taylor property. So at this time, we're only proposing to remove the frag on the Taylor property, and then a regular mowing protocol, basically just to keep the path open, would be what we would recommend.
Okay. I actually do have one final clarification question, and it's for David. On the plan where the footpath ends and the proposed catwalk begins, is that right in that crosshatched area where the dike intersects it, or where does the catwalk start?
Right at the northerly edge of the dike. So there's materials there that we want to get up and over with a safe structure.
Okay. And is that notation telling me that it's 10.6 feet from the property line? That's my question, actually, is how far would the catwalk be from the property line at that point?
Correct. It's 10.6 feet from the angle point in the property line where the catwalk starts. Yeah.
Okay. That's all I have for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Anybody else on the commission with a question at this point in time?
I have one question, Bob.
All right, Tom.
I was wondering how the Taylors were planning on getting out to their boat. That is, what kind of what are they going to use, and how will it be stored in terms of the elevated walkway? Assuming it will be stored there, and if it's not, where else would it be stored?
Just a minute, let me talk to Mr. Taylor. I'll be right back.
This is something I'll have to check on, but I feel like Ted Keon once told me that no boats are allowed to be stored at the end of a catwalk. But I'll have to double check on that.
When you, Nikki, when you say the end, you mean at the water end?
Yes.
Yes, I believe that is true. That, and they also can't be anchored. They can't be tied to the end of the catwalk.
Right.
And I would like to make sure that the applicants know this. That affects the thinking.
Mr. Taylor said that most likely they would use either a kayak that's stored above the high water mark or a stand-up paddleboard to get out to their mooring.
So the dinghy would not be used?
Right, unless they, well, theoretically, they could keep that up on the path and bring it along the catwalk. I don't know how often that would happen, though.
Okay. All right, so we have the Hoveys, I think, who are, have their hand up. So I think this is a good moment for that.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good morning. Hey, I'm sitting here with Lee Hovey, Kim Hovey, Romy Hovey, and myself. This is Sam Hovey. Just had a couple quick thoughts on what has transpired so far today. The first is we have, from the onset, been absolutely not opposed to any sort of boardwalk that was going to be along the ground. So the fact that our initial opposition was to an elevated structure. So we have no problem with whatever boardwalk the Taylors are looking to create in order not to use the easement. On a quick just point on the easement, 98% of the time, the easement is dry. It's all rocked driveway. There's a very small portion against the boathouse that gets wet. So I just want to clarify that. It's you know, everybody's making it out like it's always wet and you can't access the Stage Harbor. It's a graveled driveway, easily accessible. But we're all for some sort of boardwalk that's on the ground that doesn't affect our property or the Strableys. So that's number one. Number two is, I know Nicole mentioned that the letters are no longer pertinent. I think and I hope that the board reads all the letters because
we're going to read them again. They read them last time.
No, I didn't mean read them during the meeting. I'm just saying all parties are still completely opposed to the catwalk. So we haven't spent much time on the catwalk. It's mostly been on the boardwalk. But I do know that all abutting neighbors are still in complete opposition of a catwalk again across the salt marsh. So the only other thing that I would say is that I know my brother had a long discussion with Bill Riley and he was going to drop off all of these revised plans, and we did not. This is the first that we've seen the revised plans. The Taylors did reach out to us to try to meet with us, but we wanted to kind of see what the revisions were first. That's
that was my failing, and I apologize for that. It's just lost in the hurry of the day. That's all.
No, I get it, Bill. I get it. It's just, you know, the Taylors did reach out to us, and we were holding off on trying to get together with them until we saw what was the revised plans and never got them. So, you know, that's kind of where we are. The last question I would have is in regards to the steps and the shellfish requiring or requesting the steps. I'm not sure what the shellfish is requesting there, because no clammers access that salt marsh to get to that shellfish bed. It's all accessed down by the harbor master's office. And so I'm not sure how the steps are an advantage or recommended by shellfish. And if maybe somebody can explain that issue. I think the steps are designed at the end of the catwalk so that the Taylors can access both sides of the catwalk to the harbor. I'm just wondering where shellfish is coming into play on that recommendation.
I would ask Dave Clark to respond to that. He went to the Shellfish Advisory Committee meeting. David?
Yeah. David Clark. So our very first plan did not show stairs at the end. If the applicant wanted stairs, we would have showed them on the initial filing. But this was a result of a meeting with the Shellfish Advisory Committee, and they asked for stairs so that the public could have access up and over this structure. And that's simply, that's the reason. We were requested to provide stairs and that's what we did.
Well, and I understand that, but I don't know why clammers never would go up and over a catwalk. I mean, there's just no, it's all private property there up until the shoreline.
Well,
They are allowed to transverse docks and private piers and all that stuff, fishermen
Well,
and. You know,
I
people
get it.
walking.
All clammers that access that shell bed either come in by skiff and anchor, or they come in over by the public landing and walk along at low tide down to whatever area they want to clam.
Yep.
I just think it's interesting that Shellfish wants stairs.
Actually, the request came from the one clammer that's on the Shellfish Advisory Committee. So,
so he's going to have access to the Taylor's boardwalk?
No.
Okay.
It's for if they're walking along this water line and then they want to keep going, they can go up and over the catwalk on these stairs and then keep walking. That's the only purpose of them.
Okay, but the shellfish wardens never walk on the salt marsh ever. They're always in the harbor. The salt marsh is actually like 3 feet above, at low tide is 3 feet above the water line.
You know, this was not a request of the Shellfish Warden. It was a request from the Shellfish Advisory Committee.
Was there a letter issued that contained the request, or was it just something that came up with in a hearing?
I have never received a letter. I don't know if David did.
No, it wasn't a letter. It was a request at the conclusion of the meeting.
Okay. All right, so
we can ask for a statement from the Shellfish Advisory Committee. I mean, as we indicated, you know, we didn't put them on our original plan, and we're just trying to accommodate the Shellfish Advisory Committee. So
no, I get, but the original plan did have a ladder at the end of the catwalk. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to get off the catwalk.
Yeah, and I believe the ladder's still there. So
okay. So
anyway, so we'll ask that, and hopefully.
Well, that's okay.
Bob?
Yeah, hold just a minute, Tom. So on the question whether a letter, I think it would be helpful for the record if they could just do a quick little letter for us with that request, because right now it's basically just hearsay, I think.
Okay, we'll reach out to the Shellfish Advisory Committee, and if they still want it, they can give us a letter.
Yeah, nothing elaborate.
Right.
All right. Mr. Hovey, do you have additional questions, comments?
No, I'm hoping that the board is going to, discuss the catwalk.
Yes. Yeah,
Given the fact that there's no other catwalk in Stage Harbor, I'm wondering how all of a sudden this is, that's the issue for all of us. With the exception of getting your feet wet to get to the harbor, just, this is a big structure, a big elevated structure across the salt marsh, 54 feet.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think, our neighbor to the southwest, the way they access Stage Harbor is they have planks that they just lay on the salt marsh and walk across, and so that damages the salt marsh. We're trying to access Stage Harbor without damaging the salt marsh, and so that's really the basis for it. I mean, aside from the fact that the Conservation Commission would never allow us to just lay planks on the salt marsh because of the damage it does. That's all.
All right, Janet, is your hand raise a new hand raise, or?
It is, but
Okay.
I think, I'm not sure, did Tom get a chance to ask his question?
Oh, I'm sorry, Tom, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to make a comment that my understanding of Title 89 is that When you have a catwalk that ends at the water's edge, the law requires that there either be stairs for the public to walk up and over, or that there be, in essence, a tunnel underneath the catwalk so the public can walk, again, by the structure. So it doesn't surprise me that they're proposing stairs, because that's one, as I understand it, that's one of the two options that the law allows and requires.
Yeah, it's just as a point of clarification, that it's chapter 90, Tom,
Oh, chapter 90, thank you.
chapter 91. Jeez.
91,
All
okay.
right.
Thank you for the correction, Bill.
All right.
All right, Janet.
All right, thanks, Bob. I'm happy to talk about the catwalk, which I've got a couple of notes here. And this is unusual from a number of perspectives. I think it's true, although just from what I've observed, that there aren't any other catwalks on Stage Harbor, and I had thought that there might have been some prohibition, but it doesn't seem to be. So 54-foot aluminum catwalk, seasonal decking, removable. I think we talked about that last time a little bit. We talked about the fact that the aluminum is a form of I guess it's extruded or something, whatever the right term is, so that there are enough holes within it to allow for about 38% light penetration. Now, we often default to allowing that in our effort to protect the catwalk, the salt marsh from being trampled by foot traffic through it. And that's a weighing and balancing that we have to do, and it comes in formally into our deliberations because any impact to the salt marsh requires a variance, which ultimately requires that the proponent go through an analysis of what the alternatives to this impact are. And that's where we get into the, trampling foot traffic versus elevated seasonal walkway. And we often prefer the elevated walkway. What's interesting here is that from personal observation, standing there looking at this marsh, which has been used to access this easement to access Stage Harbor for decades, it struck me that the marsh was in good shape. Notwithstanding all of the development pressures in and around Stage Harbor, I could not perceive a trampled footpath through the marsh that's been used. It doesn't show evidence of the kind of damage that we're normally very concerned about. And so when I balance that against, if you say 38% light penetration, the flip side of that is 62% of loss of light, the potential damage to the salt marsh from installing this seems to me to overweigh any need for current protection by installation of this. And so since the Taylors already have an easement to access Stage Harbor, admittedly through, it can be mucky to walk through there at certain tides, that doesn't seem to be harming the marsh and doesn't call out for an alternative of building this structure. So I don't see the need for it. I don't think that the alternatives analysis considered what the current means of access is. And as we figure out what to do with this, and when we want to schedule it, I just want to make one note that I brought up before, which is a question. So have you all yet filed with ZBA?
No, not yet.
Okay.
But I'd like to respond briefly. The previous owner of the property now owned by the Taylors did not have a boat and did not utilize the easement or walk across the marsh. The Taylors are a boating family, and it's their intention to use that access frequently, not necessarily daily, but they're here. They're here for the entire summer. They like to go boating. They like to go kayaking. They like to do stand-up paddle. And all those things are going to require traversing the marsh. And so the fact that the hubby's use hasn't done any damage. I mean, I don't know how they get out and do their shell fishing and stuff, or whether they use the easement or not, or whether they go, alternately, sort of where that drainage comes through the dike. But the Taylors intend to make frequent use of the catwalk, and they don't want to get up to their knees in muck. They don't want to damage the salt marsh. They know how valuable the salt marsh is to the ecosystems. And I have to say that this is the first time in 40 years of requesting these that I've heard a Conservation Commission member opine that it's better to trample through the marsh and do the damage to the marsh than it is to have an elevated structure that's designed to protect the marsh. We're also meeting the 1-for-1 requirement, or 1.5 to 1. I'm not certain. Dave can answer that. So that, which is designed to assure that there's sufficient light for the plant life beneath the catwalk. So in addition to having light penetration through the catwalk itself, we're high enough so that there'll be significant sunlight received by that plant life during the course of a normal day. So I got to tell you, I'm just on, but all right.
With all due respect, Bill, I don't believe I said it's better to trample a salt marsh than to put over it. I think that's a mischaracterization of the observation I was making. And I do believe the hubbies, based on the number of watercraft that I see stored in that boathouse and around it, have made extensive use of accessing the harbor. And I was surprised at what seemed to be a healthy salt marsh system. That's the observation I was making.
Do you have another observation, Janet, or?
No, I will have one, in terms of scheduling, I have a recommendation.
Okay.
We're there yet.
Okay.
Just one final thing on Janet's.
Okay.
By observation, the hubbies don't use the easement area to access Stage Harbor. They generally use the drainage area as shown on the plan for access.
Okay.
That's why the salt marsh is not damaged. So.
Actually, can I address that for you?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. First of all, Bill just mentioned that the water's up to your knees.
I'm sorry. Who's
this is Sam Hovey just responding.
Sam Hovey. Okay.
But Bill just mentioned that the water is up to your knees when you access the harbor. The water's not above your ankles. That's number one. Number two is the hubbies have continued to access that easement for the last 50 years. We've had 3 sailboats out front. We've had 3 dinghies on the shore. We've all sailed in the harbor, and we continue to access that with paddle boards and kayaks of our own. So I just want to clarify that the Taylors are not the only one that access the harbor from that area. We are very active in that entire area.
Mr. Chair, just briefly, I didn't say you're up to your knees in water. I said they didn't want to be up to their knees in the salt marsh, not the water.
They're not in the salt marsh. It's not above your ankles, all the way out to the harbor.
Now, that'll be the first time they walk down. Then the second time they'll be deeper, and the third time they'll be deeper than that. And eventually they'll be up to their knees in the salt marsh.
Okay, so for 50 years that we've done it, it has never gone above our ankles, Bill. Just for clarification. Go ahead.
Okay. I think we've had our statements back and forth on that issue. Do we have any other comments from commissioners at this point in time? I don't see any hands. So we do have the letter from South Coastal Harbor Management Committee. Is that their formal name? And I believe all the commissioners have seen it. I don't know whether it's been posted. Trying to figure out whether we should read it. I will say that they're obviously against it. It was a unanimous vote against it, but the rationale, I think if we were to read off the bullet points, Nikki, on the reasons that they give for opposing it, I think that might be instructive.
Sure. Just pulling it up now. Increased, so it's the South Coastal Harbor Management, yep. So increased stress on the harbor marsh, native vegetation and shellfish. All neighbors are against it. Close proximity to the harbor master dinghy dock and launching facilities. The SCHM plan promotes the conservation of waterways and preservation of waterfront. It was noted that a crude path in the wetlands has already been cleared behind the boathouse. Neighbor has stated they can walk down the driveway.
Okay. So in thinking about their points, they mentioned a close proximity to the harbor master dinghy dock and launching facilities. I don't know where that is, what they mean by close, whether that would be, I mean, it's really not I guess it's not a zoning. I mean, it's not a conservation issue, but I was curious about it. I don't know if anyone knows the answer to that. And then when they talk about increased stress on the harbor marsh, native vegetation and shellfish, I'm guessing, but I don't know what the intent of that observation on their part was, whether that's just because there would be a catwalk over marsh. So I'm not entirely understanding the rationale behind some of these, but whatever.
So
some
I
of these
pulled up a picture of from above, and this is the harbor master area. So it's not that close. I mean, they would have to leave their property, go all the way over here, and
right. Okay, that's helpful then. All right. Okay. So, Janet, I think you said you had some thoughts on how to proceed. And I'm quite honestly, we have obviously a lot of opposition to this.
Yep.
I will note that if we are to focus on the Wetlands Protection Act, local bylaws from a conservation perspective, and they do allow water access, including structures like a catwalk and a boardwalk. They allow it, and there's a provision for it. There's an exception for it, and we've allowed them before. So, in thinking about whether or not there's anything in our guidance that prohibits us from permitting it, I don't necessarily think that there are any. But clearly, there's a lot of objection. We don't want to, make everyone angry at us by allowing something that everyone's against, but nevertheless, we have to proceed with the regulations that are in front of us. So your thoughts, Janet, on the next steps?
I don't have a thought at the moment on whether or not we should actually issue a permit for this. That's going to be up to each individual commissioner to make that decision whether we would approve it.
Yes.
I would just note that in terms of figuring out whether we should proceed now or continue this, my recommendation would be that prudence dictates that we continue this until after ZBA has heard it.
Yeah.
The last time we went through a lot of angst about a catwalk and ultimately wrote a difficult order of conditions and approved that order of conditions, that application was denied by ZBA because it was too close to the property line. It did not meet the 15-foot setback, and they refused to issue a dimensional variance. When I look at the site plan here and see this is only 10 feet, 10.6 feet, I don't know on what basis the applicant thinks they have a decent shot at success. They may, I just don't know about it. But I don't think I think we should hold off and wait until after that process has gone forward before we spend the time and effort to try to write an order of conditions or a denial, whichever way the vote would go, and hold off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah. Bill.
The fact that it's been mentioned frequently that all the neighbors object, they're not objecting for reasons related to the conservation regulations and bylaw. They're objecting to the visual fact of the elevated catwalk. And if you go down there, walk down to the end of the walkway proposed by the Taylors, and look to your right, you'll see the planks, the Strabling property, which have completely worn away the marsh, laid across the marsh, and you can hardly see them because they've been sunk down so low over the years. So, I think that even mentioning the fact that the neighbors object to it, when there's no bait, there's the walkway right there. Yeah.
Yeah, there are plenty of examples, Bill, that you could cite on how it shouldn't be done. I agree with you on that.
Okay, so that militates for providing access across the marsh that protects the marsh. Anyway,
Right.
I understand, but I see the idea of, let's wait to see what the zoning board does. I think that does a disservice to the applicant. The zoning board's going to want a comment letter. And so
it's the old chicken and egg problem between conservation and zoning. It very often comes up. But Janice's point is well taken, that we have recent experience where zoning undid basically everything that we had done.
What property was that?
That was 41 Locust Lane, a catwalk over a marsh on the pond. And that was about 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. So it's fresh.
We're still fuming.
We are still fuming. That was a huge waste of time and effort.
Well, I think
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I mean, it would seem to me that at a minimum, we should have a straw vote so we know what kind of letter of recommendation you're going to send. I mean, it doesn't seem fair to me that we go off to the zoning board without any idea what the Conservation Commission is going to do or say. I mean, if you're going to send a letter that says this is a project that can be conditioned, then that's okay. If you're going to say no, we absolutely refuse to approve it, well, then give us our denial and let us take our appeal to DEP. So it's, that's our conundrum here. And again, I believe that if you denied this catwalk, it would be the first catwalk denied in the town of Chatham by the Conservation Commission.
Well, it's a bold statement. I have no way of refuting it, but I will say that in my time on the commission, I don't recall denying ones outright. Yeah, that's true.
But they weren't always fully favored. Let's put it that way.
we were always did it with holding our nose for sure. Do the Hovey's are you Sam Hovey? Is your hand up from the previous time, or do you have additional comment? I'm guessing.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
No, I do think my hand was up from prior, but I did have one follow-up question. There's a long as you enter Oyster Pond, past the second marina, as you're entering the pond and you look back up to the left toward those condominiums on the hill, there appears to be like a 200-foot catwalk that was approved. And it's a wooden structure with no railings, and it appears to be no more than 3 feet over the salt marsh. Do any of you guys recall that boardwalk, that catwalk?
Probably.
This is Bill Riley. The commission approved the catwalk across, I think it's a vegetated wetland, by the Keating family. You think that's the one, Janet?
Yes, I do. The one it was, and that involved a lot of the Phragmites removal as mitigation.
Right, Teresa was on that as well, I believe.
But it appears to be like a 300-foot catwalk, but it's wood with no railings, and it's no more than 2 or 3 feet off the ground. So it doesn't seem like with that catwalk. I guess we're having a problem with the elevation of 5 feet off the ground with aluminum rails. When we drive, by way of boat, when we go through Oyster River into Oyster Pond, into the Mill Pond, to try to find other catwalk structures. This appears to be brand new, and it's made of completely different materials with no railings and much lower to the salt marsh. And I just was hoping that maybe somebody could comment on that particular structure as it relates to revising and doing something different for this catwalk.
Well, Mr. Chair, the Taylors would prefer to have a wooden catwalk that's closer to the top of the marsh and without a handrail. Dave Clark designed this catwalk in accordance with the regulations and policies of DEP and the Conservation Commission. And we'd be happy to lower it and make it out of wood. I mean, we don't want it 5 feet in the air with a handrail either. We're just trying to balance, trying to do what the regulations seem to require. So it's, anyway, we'd love to talk about that with the commission. What does the commission think about it?
It's an excellent point, Bill. I don't have the requirements that we currently work under at my fingertips, but I guess what I'm sensing is that if it were lower and there was no handrail, there might be less objection from the hubbies. But that's really sort of a secondary issue. We have to remind ourselves to focus on the conservation related issues here. But nevertheless, I will mention that. I believe that I'm sensing that. I don't know if there's a room there for a further conversation between the Taylors and the hubbies on that issue.
Yes, there is, but for that kind of conversation to be fruitful, again, we need an indication from the commission that that effort would be met with some level of acceptance by the commission. In other words, we've done it before. I think the catwalks up off Linnell Lane, if they even still have them anymore, there's been so much change up there. But they were, and this is, these were from, I don't want to say exactly antediluvian, but it was a long time ago, and they were wooden, and they were lower, and that was something that we discussed with the commission at that time. That was Paul Chamberlain was the chair, Dee Dee was on it. I can't remember the other members, but there were 4 catwalks from Linnell Lane and Old Wharf Road out to the beach on Chatham Harbor. They were all wood and they were all lower. So we'd be happy to propose something like that and discuss it with the hubbies.
Yeah,
but we need guidance from the commission.
Right. Yeah, the aluminum thing, of course, you're aware. Well, I can't address that at this moment. I don't know if Nikki, if you have any thoughts on what the minimum requirements would be for height and railing.
Railing, I don't know. That would be, I mean, conservation doesn't care about railings. That's building, whether it's safety purposes
Okay.
or not. And I mean, we're not going to go lower than the 1.5, correct? I mean, that's kind of our regulation, the 1 to 1.5 ratio. That, I mean, we require that for other catwalks. I don't see why we would go against our regulation on this one. And then the material, that's, the
Yeah.
sun variant. Whether how much light you want to penetrate, which is why they, I think, went with the aluminum, is because recently that's been
Well, but
topic.
the aluminum was relative to proposals of through flow plastic decking, which is not being proposed here. So
And the railing, see, the railing's required because of the height of the structure.
right. So if it were lower, the railing wouldn't be required.
That's right.
Yeah.
But the railing has no conservation impacts, so I don't really think we should lower the dock just because we don't want a railing, because
No, I agree.
Well, I know, but you do have the authority to allow a lower catwalk, because the 1.5 to 1 or whatever the number is a policy. It's not a regulation.
And if it were a wooden catwalk, could it still be seasonal?
Oh, of course it's seasonal.
Okay.
Yeah, Dave Clark can answer it better, but they put them in sections, 8 or 10 foot sections. And at the end of the season, I mean, so the support post would remain, but the catwalk itself is lifted out and carried back along the.
All right. So that's not germane. So the only question is whether it can or should be lowered, I guess, strictly from an environmental perspective, whether that will be allowable.
Yeah, and I know one of the things that is frequently discussed when discussing light penetration to the plant community is the angle of the sun relative to the catwalk. And here, thinking about it as a summertime structure, where the sun is north of the meridian, you would get maximum light penetration because the sun is starting over on the northeast side and setting over on the southwest side, and so you're going to get maximum light penetration under the catwalk, even if it's a lower height. So.
Mm-hmm. Would it be appropriate and possible for your team to sort of model for us a lower height that would still allow adequate light penetration to the marsh?
Sure, be happy to do that.
I think that would be
Bob,
helpful.
I'd like to note that the latest scientific studies done on the subject suggest that 2 to 1 would actually is the optimal ratio. So it's just the opposite direction.
Okay.
I agree with that. I don't think it should be lowered just because people don't like the way it looks.
I agree. I just was wondering whether or not by lowering it, we still achieve adequate sunlight penetration. But sounds like perhaps that's not a fruitful approach. So,
well, what we could do is perhaps we could do a little research, not on the recommended, right, but on the experience of the catwalks here in Chatham. Photographic evidence of the condition of the salt marsh under a lower level catwalk. I believe there are some in town, and I guess that the obligation of the commission is to protect the plant life. So
Yes, it is.
we think we're protecting it by putting in a catwalk, trying to keep everybody happy. We'd be happy to lower it, assuming we can prove that the plant life beneath it is going to be protected. I mean, you know,
Yeah, the issue though, Bill, I think, in thinking back, we do have varying guidance on that, and it's so it's not a hard and fast rule. Bob, your hand is up.
Yeah, perhaps if we change the material to wood and then allow proper spacing for light penetration, that would help too.
That it then could be lowered.
Yeah, and it's only going to be in from mid-May to mid-October. I mean, so
Right.
there's a significant portion of the growing season when it would not be installed.
Yes, it's seasonal for sure.
Yeah, and well, but I mean, you could impose a condition, you know, May 15th to October 15th.
Mm.
So
an even shorter season. Yeah. Okay, Janet.
I would welcome if they're willing to do a bit of digging on that issue and come back with a proposal for a wooden seasonal structure, and whatever data you can get your hands on in terms of, we don't have really good data, I believe, on light penetration for wood. We have it for plastic, vinyl, and we have it for aluminum. We don't have it for wood. But I think Bob Del Vecchio raised the right point. A lot of that will have to do with the interplay of the height and the spacing of the planks. It is optimal as an east-west structure, so that's best for light. So that's a good thing. So maybe there might be a way forward looking at an alternative design.
I don't want to cut anybody short, but we do have an executive session that we
have
are
spent a long time on this. Yeah.
Enter, and I just heard from town council that he needs to be off the call by about noon. So
Okay.
we still have a
All
few
right.
more items. So I really suggest we make a motion on when we want to continue this too.
I agree.
All right, yeah,
Sounds-
and I agree as well. Dave Clark, are you still with us, David? Yes, you are.
Barely.
You gotta stop taking no-dos and drinking more coffee. Anyway, so
I think September 8th is probably an appropriate date.
okay.
Parenthetically, will that be after your ZBA?
No, we're not.
No, we haven't even filed the ZBA. So.
Oh, you haven't even filed. Okay, just curious.
We're not going to the ZBA till we know where we're going.
I got it. Okay, that's
okay.
I understand your position. All right.
Thanks very much. So September 8th.
So let's have and plus I will note that we really haven't dove into the massive mitigation area uplands. So
on that point, should we have the limits of the mitigation out in the lawn by the house staked?
Well, if you could just put a few in, just so we could make sure we were seeing it correctly.
Take care of that.
You don't have to go crazy with it, but
okay,
better than none.
Thank you.
Okay, let's have a motion to continue this.
Make a motion that we continue 535 Stage Harbor Road to September 8th, 2021.
Clark, second.
Roll call vote. Bob.
Aye.
Janet.
Aye.
Tom.
Aye.
Joe.
Aye.
Karen. Maybe with us or not. Muted, maybe. And Terry's out, and I vote aye in case we don't hear from Terry or Mary in the next second or two. I say the motion carries.
All right.
This is Karen.
There she is. All right, very good.
Sorry, I couldn't get it unmuted.
It happens.
So, the Taylor family and I greatly appreciate the time and the effort made by the commission members. Thank you very much.
All right. think that we can move on to the certificates now. Is that right, Nikki?
Nope, this is the 24 and 2 Salt Pond Road, Edward
that's
and
right.
Cheryl Acton and Gerald Milden, map 17J, parcels 2 and
That's-
4. SE 10-3485. They revised their plan to get rid of the wording that says the revetment is to be retrofitted or reconstructed as necessary to elevate the top of the CES. So they got rid of that wording. So they're just going to be doing the groundwork behind the revetment, not doing anything to the revetment at the point. So they wanted to get rid of the whole revetment construction section.
Yeah, section. Yeah, and that's where we got hung up last time by and large.
Yep. And then otherwise, I think Sean is fine with the order.
I'm here if you have any other additional questions as well, through the chair.
Right. Bob, is your hand up for this one?
Yes, I just wanted to make a quick comment. It's in the title, it still says rock revetment repair. Should that be eliminated?
Yes, we can. So this is just a draft. I wanted to make sure that the board was fine with it, and we'll get the revised plan. We're going to have a plan revision. So we'll add that to the revision, and we'll get that over today. And any other comments that you would have.
Yes, in the revised OOC, I think it still says rock revetment repair as well, for the title, in the title.
Okay, I can change that.
Okay, thank you.
Bob, I have a couple of other suggestions on changing the proposed order.
All right.
And I will try to be short and to the point.
Appreciate it.
Okay, I'm still concerned. I think regulation 2.05 sub 3 sub A sub 3 requires us to put certain language into the order. Matter of fact, I'm absolutely convinced of it, and we haven't done that yet. So I think that should be added, the language from that subsection of the regulation. I would suggest it be added to the special conditions, although I'm open to another location. And then let's see.
Do you have specific proposal here?
What, the language?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. I'll read. You want me to read you what the regulation requires?
You just want to put the regulation language in there, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, since we're supposed to put it in any OOC or COC.
Can you
and then I have a couple of other suggestions.
Okay, go to your other ones, and we'll come back.
Can we just circle back to that for one moment?
Okay. Right.
Sure.
So that language is for project. This already has a revetment. That language is designed to prevent people from building revetments for projects that do not include them. And if this didn't have one, that would make all the sense in the world. But when you already have a pre-existing, already permitted revetment, it doesn't make any sense to say this project can't be protected by a revetment.
That's why
because
we don't have it here. That's why this language gets removed.
All revetments have a limited time span for their existence. There will be times when repairs and upgrades and other things are going to be proposed by, I assume, by the landowner. This regulation prohibits that.
Well, I can't imagine if we would let it go into disrepair and then have them remove it. That would be a disaster zone.
No, they don't have to remove it. They just can't repair it.
No, because if they don't repair it, then the thing will fail and the whole bank will slump into the water and erosion will, I mean, that's not going to happen. We're never going to let it not repair it.
And you also have to look at the order of conditions that allowed it, which would presumably, I haven't looked at it recently, allow for maintenance, monitoring, and repair as needed.
This is Mike Ford, also here for Mr. Acton. We would object to that language. We would object to that language being inserted. As Janet indicated, it has no application here where a revetment already exists. The revetment has its own order of conditions and is governed by that. That's why the section on the revetment is coming out of this.
And I think I would agree with Janet and Nikki on this as well. It's
okay. Well, I got a couple of other suggestions.
Okay.
General condition D.17 requires an annual report. I would suggest we put that in the special conditions just to make sure it it gets the appropriate attention that it needs. Another source of confusion is general conditions C.4 and D.6. Both talk about pesticide use. And I don't know if there's any reason for pesticide use in the work plan that's proposed for this project. And if it is, then we ought to have, you know, a uniform statement rather than having two general conditions that more sort of conflict with each other. So that's just a suggestion that we ought to clean that up. And also on general condition E5, I think we have a, let's see, let me get to that. E5? No, there we go. Pardon me. Yeah, that's just, that's another pesticide use question that but there was also an item, I thought, that we had one where they for a pool, but that's the other site. So that's it.
Okay.
All right, I'll look over the pesticide ones and get something consolidated, but we've really got to get going.
Yeah, I don't think it's.
I was going quick.
I don't think there's any harm in having the general conditions as they are stated to remain as they are. But if you can consolidate, Nikki, that's great. Any other questions, comments? And I don't see a hand, so I believe that we're ready for a motion, Bob.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the order of conditions for 22 and 2 Salt Pond Road.
Second.
Roll call vote. Bob?
Aye.
Janet?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So that is carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you all.
Okay, next we have the certificates of compliance. These should be pretty quick and easy. 20 Dune Drive, Todd Gleason, map 16A, parcel C7, SC 10-2963. Demo of an existing house, construction of a new house and pool with site work and landscaping. So back in 2019 or so, they had applied, or they wanted to change landscapers, so they picked someone else because they didn't like the job the first person was doing or something like that. So Callie, and some plants had died off, so Callie did an administrative review to have them replaced. They've been planted. They've done their planting seasons, but it's still, they're still small, but they're there and they're doing fine. They demarcated the area with their split rail fence. The house is in compliance. A stair location was modified, but it didn't increase footprint or anything like that. It just went from one end of the deck to the middle of the deck. And the rest of the landscaping is really well naturalized and doing very good. So I recommend approval for that one. And then next, after that, I figure we'll vote on them.
Yeah, let's do them both, yeah.
225 and 275 Champlain Road, Burton, Stanier, and Dorian Burgos, map 12A, parcels L1 and L2, SE 10-2627, installation of stone steps. So they applied for a COC again back in 2019, but a few steps were, additional steps were put in and were approved. And so Callie had Wilkinson do some extra planting and seeding of bare areas, and now they're asking for us to approve that. They got us the plans that of the planting areas they did, which is all it was waiting for. So I recommend approval for that one as well.
Okay. Any comments, questions on either? And hearing none, I think we can make a motion, Bob.
Make a motion that we approve certificates of compliance for 20 Dune Drive and also 225 and 275 Champlain Road.
Clark, second.
Roll call. Bob?
Aye.
Janet?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
All right, so with that, we would just need to adjourn the meeting, leave this Teams meeting and go into the other one that I sent yesterday and this morning. So hopefully everyone has it. And yeah,
Hopefully.
that's that. Yeah.
All right. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to adjourn
And I guess, I guess,
and
I
move
guess,
to the executive session.
yes, I guess so.
Clark, second.
Roll call vote. Bob,
Aye.
Janet,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Karen,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So we are now leaving. I guess Channel 18 can stop the recording.